Welcome to another session. I hope you are well. This is the first part of a series of sessions that I believe will take place over the next few days. I themed the series Relationships that Men Should Avoid. And in today's session, I start by talking about women who are the same age as you. Now, let me preface today's session and today's conversation with the following statements. I'm not referring to dating. That's the first. I'm specifically referring to relationships. Now, for those who have not seen my conversations about the difference between both, here is a very short summary. When it comes to intersexual dynamics, men and women are out to get something. Unlike traditional marketplaces, where you come to a location and there are buyers and sellers, in intersexual dynamics we have something similar, but it occurs in various places. Sometimes it's in a local shopping mall. Sometimes it's online, it's digital. When you go on Tinder or Bumble or any dating app, you're in a marketplace. You're looking for something. When you go to a bar, club, some form of a gig, you are in a marketplace. A marketplace is simply where there is potential and opportunity for you to meet someone and start a conversation. The conversation morphs from what I call introduction to conversation stage, goes to the third part, which is some form of intimacy, affection, or sex. Fourth, it goes to relationships, and then you start transitioning to commitment, dedication, and marriage. I draw the line at the point of relationships, but I use marriage as the final goal in mind for men. This simply means that you have the dating marketplace and the relationship marketplace. The dating marketplace is short term, it's for fun, it's for some form of experience, but it's not long dated. The relationship marketplace is for meaningful long-term relationships where men commit to a woman and therefore take on the responsibility and the liabilities that come with relationships. I'm speaking about the latter group. Now, if men are to avoid women who are of a similar age as they are, it would be wrong of me not to explain why. Now, I'm going to jump around several topics or points, and I hope I bring it all back together. Some time ago, I started by explaining intersexual dynamics from the female lens. And I started as follows. I said, women, you go through stages of your life, but it's important for you to find yourself first before you get yourself into a relationship. And I went as follows. Do not get married if you are a woman, except, and there are exceptions to this, if you were raised to be a wife, then you're an exemption to this. If you were trained and raised on how to serve and to look to marriage as a goal, as a pursuit, you are exempt. If you are not in the West, you, by virtue of your age, you are exempt. But for people in the West, I said to women, you should not get married before age 27. Between age 18 to 22, focus on your education and college. Graduate. If you want to travel for a year, you can. Let's assume you do travel for a year. 23 up until 27 is 5 years. Usually it takes about 2,000 work hours to become proficient at anything. 2,000 work hours of constant improvement and practice, you're competent in something. So the education which you have and the qualification which you have allows you to develop in a career that enables you to discover yourself as an individual and as a woman before a man comes into your life and before you choose motherhood or being a wife. At 27, you've achieved 10,000 hours in your field of pursuit. Now, assuming you do not travel for a year, it would mean you even achieved that at 26. You're competent at something. It simply means that your identity will never be hidden in a man. You will never rely completely on a man. But more importantly, you have multiple identities. You're a surgeon. Perhaps you're a doctor who is not a surgeon, a GP. You're an accountant. And so in coming to a relationship, despite your education and qualifications and wealth not playing an ultimate part in a man's selection process, it gives you a sense of self-assurance, self-esteem, self-concept. Now, what this simply means is at 27, you can start entertaining relationships from men. You can date in the interim, and I even make it very clear, you can date, but keep your body count as low as possible. You can date multiple men, but you don't have to have sex with multiple men. I then say, as part of that journey, focus on your purpose and your dream. There is something about you. A woman is not defined by being married or being a mother. A woman is defined by a purpose. Discover that purpose, identify your goals and dreams and vision, and pursue that goal and that vision so you know who you are. I make it very clear. Do not get married before age 27. Do not have children out of wedlock. Do not have children before age 27. If you do meet someone and you're interested in a long-term relationship, should you get married at 27, it's best to stay in that relationship for at least 3 years before you start having children. Now, this simply means if you do not want to start having kids by 30, you pull the date forward. The reason being, most people go through an in-love phase and they fall out of love. 3 years gives you enough time to determine and decide if the man in question is one you want to commit your life to. In the first 2 to 3 years, if the relationship hasn't worked, you annul the relationship, walk away. But once a child comes into the picture, it messes everything up. Now, recognize, I am speaking to men in this session, but I thought it's an important preface. Now, what that simply means is, and this is why I start today's session for men, and I've explained this so women can understand that this is not a bash, a feast against women. I am trying to look at outcomes for men. A woman's value in the marketplace with regards to dating and relationship is assessed by men in different ways. Primarily her sexual marketplace value, her reproductive fertility value, and her non-sexual marketplace value. The non-sexual marketplace value captures a number of things: her character, her attitude, her temperament, her behavior, her level of training, whether she was raised and saw relationships modeled, and a few other things. The younger the woman is, the higher her sexual marketplace value, reproductive fertility value, and non-sexual marketplace value. Now, I bring in the men into the picture now. The reason I said avoid women who are your age is for the following reasons. And I'm going to use men of different age groups, and I'll piece them together so you can understand. There's something called a balance of power. A woman who's 18 has beauty, youth, and hopefully some form of chastity and purity. She commands the highest value in the marketplace compared to a woman who's 40. A woman who's younger will always outcompete her older self in the marketplace, amongst men, and from a man's perspective. So on a balance of power dynamics basis, what you have is two people coming to the table hoping to have some form of value exchange. A woman who's 18 and who is dating or in a relationship with a man who's 18 has high leverage. The man who's 18 only has potential. He has achieved nothing. He hasn't even started college, or perhaps he just started college. So all he offers is potential and hopes. But you see, hope is not a strategy. And if I had a daughter, I would simply be saying, he might be a perfectly lovely man, but he cannot provide for you. He cannot protect you. He cannot provide a purpose because he's still a boy. Therefore, a woman's value far exceeds a man's value of the same age. That carries on until age 35. Now, I gave you what I considered guidelines for women. The same applies to men, but there's a slight difference. There's a number change. For women, it's 28. That's the age at which a woman starts to consider relationships and marriage. For men, it's 35. Now, what this simply means is on a balance of power basis, a woman will always have a higher value, especially if she's attractive, compared to a man, at least until he turns 35. There is an imbalance of power when you date a woman your age. The younger you are, the imbalance of power far exceeds what you think. As you get older and get to 35, the balance of power starts to become even. So at 35, a man who is 35 dating a woman who is 35, the man has only come into his masculinity and manhood, and therefore he understands who he is. The woman, on the other hand, here is the key part, and I'm going to expand this conversations, and I'm going to ruffle some feathers, and I'm going to get some people really, really, really angry, both men and women. I couldn't care less. Take it for what it is. Eat the meat, spit out the bones. I don't really care. But I want men to understand how to think. Some relationships are great on paper than they are in reality. So the younger you are, the more valuable the woman is compared to you. But as you get older, the more value you start to accrue. As we age as men, our value increases because our ability to convert our potential to reality is manifested. We have more of what women want, generally speaking, which is resources and the ability to provide a purpose, to be the priest, to profess our love by our presence, to provide and protect. The younger we are, the less we can do such. Therefore, there is an imbalance of power. So a man who is 20, we'll move from 18 to 20 now, dating a woman who is 20, perfectly lovely young man and perfectly lovely young woman. The men who can afford such women, from a dating and a relational perspective, would be in their 30s. Because from a balance of power basis, she's 20, she's got beauty, she's got youth, she's got fertility, she's got chastity, some form of purity, she's been raised well. What is comparable would be a man in his 30s, early to mid 30s, who has achieved something. Now, there might be some exceptions where he might be 28, but it doesn't matter. He's closer to 30 than he is to 20. He has something of equal or comparable exchange. But if she's dating a boy who is 20, his competition are men who are 10 years his senior. And what this tends to do is put excessive and undue pressure on the young boy. He starts to think about how he can make her happy, so she actually looks up to him as a great provider, priest, protector, provider, and a seer, someone who has a purpose. But he's still a boy. You are still a boy. And therefore, what tends to happen is most young men find that at 20, because you do not have resources, you start thinking from a position of a provider and you take shortcuts. Rather than keep your head focused on the dream and vision, rather than working until 35, you start thinking about how you can provide so that she can nest. The woman is looking to nest. You should be looking to hunt, going into the wilderness, going into the Amazon, and finding yourself. So the pressure placed on you can be so excessive that this brings me to the third part of today's session, which is you sacrifice your purpose. You sacrifice your vision. You sacrifice your goals and dreams. Why? Because of a woman. That relationship has then become a dream killer, which is why I say avoid women who are at the same age as you are, generally speaking, irrespective of age. The younger you are, the more pronounced you should heed to what I'm saying. As you get to 35, it's equally just as important to heed to the recommendation. And I will cover a session where I talk about women above 35. That will be a separate session. I don't think a lot of women will like it, but I think from a man's perspective, it's important to understand Why? Now, a woman who's 25, I've moved from 18 to 20 to 25, dated a man who is 25. He's graduated, he's done 18 to 22 college, and he's been working now for 2 years or more. So he can see that the hard work is starting to pay off. They might both live together. Huge mistake, by the way, until marriage, but huge mistake, or until within 6 months of marriage. Huge mistake to live with a woman. I might make that a separate session, but anyway, as at 25, he has something, but he's still a boy. He hasn't matured yet. From a balance of power basis, she has more value than you do. And you will have excessive pressure on your shoulders to become a man that you would naturally become with time, but you're forced to become due to expectations. You see, expectations is usually why relationships fail. Wherever there are expectations, there's bound to be disappointments, because the one constant thing in life is change, and most young men place their identities on what they do, what they provide, or who they are. And whenever change occurs, there is a loss of identity and relational identity. So most men are disappointed. Most women are disappointed in the men as change occurs. If you choose relationships with women who are the same age as you, now I'm not suggesting you can't date them. Date, fine, short term, but not for long term, because you will end up sacrificing your purpose. Now, over time, my experience has been, and my observation has been, when you date a woman who is the same age as you, she might love you. She might like you. She might enjoy your company. But understand something. There is instinctively something in a woman looking for father. This is partly why, traditionally, the woman stayed in her father's house until she found a husband-to-be. But the parents of the husband-to-be funded the relationship because the young man could not afford to fund the relationship. Or in the West, she found a man, but the father of the bride paid for the wedding because the young man could not afford to pay for the wedding, still too young. Now, there's an important part of today's session that I think is important, or that I think that is vital. When you date women your age, over time, they end up resenting you. You see, leadership is a charge that men and a cross that men must carry in relationships. Leadership. Not partnership, leadership. Women want to be consulted with regards to matters involving both parties in a relationship, but a woman also wants someone who is assertive, dominant, knowledgeable. A woman wants someone who can see, a seer, someone who can see ahead and who has ideas of solutions, rather than someone who would look to her for solutions. Now, there are exceptions to what I just stated. Of course, we've raised 2 or 3 generations of harder men, softer men and harder women. Most men in the West, about 80% or more, are what I call beta males. Women are hard, the men are soft, feminized. So yes, those women might fall under the category of those who are not looking for leadership. But a man's purpose necessitates leadership. A woman will resent you over time. It'll start well, it'll start fine. But remember, on a balance of power basis, she has suitors and people who find her attractive that are much more accomplished than you are. And there will be a pressure, undue pressure on you to be a man that you should become naturally over time, but you're forced to become. Now, one of the reasons she would resent you is that you may not be able to fulfill all of her desires and needs. In this day and age of social media, that men are under huge pressure. I have seen young men in their 20s think and have the expectation placed on their shoulders that they have to provide a certain type of lifestyle to a woman. They've only just started working. And what I tend to find is such boys, such young men, I should say, start to look for alternative ways to make money that are not always legitimate. And where he falls short, she resents it. But even where he doesn't fall short, but he confides in her so that she can understand what he is doing, she resents him. Now, interestingly, number 4, she will end up trying to mother you. Over time, remember, both of you are the same age. So at the time you start dating, you're both kids, you're children. You have no lived experience, you're not functional adults if you start just before 18. And if you're above 18, you tend to find that both of you are equals. And as a matter of fact, emotionally and even relationally, she's more mature than you are. Why? Because women start to get sexual advances these days from about 12. Because they're coming into puberty much earlier, they're blossoming much younger, and the moment a woman starts to look attractive, men start to look at her in a certain manner. Her body starts to morph and change, and so she's already forced to become an adult or become mature, that's a better word, compared to a man who can be in his basement playing video games until 20. A woman from age 13, 12, 14 is already getting everyone interest in her. So she's a lot more mature. And you tend to find, whenever you have this 50-50 partnership nonsense, she starts to mother you. A woman can lay with you, but most women are not looking for sons. The moment she starts to mother you, it accelerates the resentment over time. Not initially, but over time. And here's the key part of what I've shared so far. She will love you, but she will seldom respect you. She will seldom honor you. She will seldom admire you, and she will seldom esteem you. Back in the day, what used to happen is that the men went out to hunt, and they would come back with their spoils, and they bring into the center of the community, and other men would esteem other men, and other men will affirm other men based on how they hunted. And women sat back and they listened and they observed, and they saw that the men of value in the community were those who other men said, he's got good character and he's a good team player. So the stories told by other men created a picture in the minds of women that led to admiration, that led to a man being esteemed, both by the group and the women. But here's the key part: led to a man being respected, and finally, and most importantly, honored. Respect is earned. When you're at the same age, it's very hard to earn respect. Now, most men wouldn't understand this conversation because the woman will convince you, of course I respect you. You're my boyfriend after all. Respect is earned. At 18, and the younger you are, and particularly if you are the same age, she can't respect her equal. I think I just said something very important. A woman cannot respect her equal. If you are the woman's equal in age, or if she sees herself as superior to you in experience, education, or whatever, she will never respect you. Now, honor is recognizing your uniqueness. But the problem is, you are at the same age as she is, and you're still a young man below 35. So you have no uniqueness. You put a dozen or half a dozen young men who are 20. It's hard to tell the difference from one to the other if you exclude the physical attributes, because you're still young men, and most young men still have the same malleable experience because of peer pressure. But as a man starts to move towards 35, what makes a man unique and what starts to separate him from his peers is his purpose. Two words: purpose and pursuit. Pursuit leads to failure. Failure affirms your uniqueness because failure identifies what makes you unique and different. Failure also reminds you of your shortfalls and shortcomings. 30 to 35 is the age period where I say to men, those are your years of failure, where you develop a masculine frame and an idea about what you are, what you like, what you do not like, and your weakness. You get to tame and go through temptations. Now, your success as a man will only come in proportion to the temptations you've overcome. So a woman can only honor you at the point where you've discovered your purpose and you're pursuing that purpose and living in that purpose. Honor is recognizing where you are unique and different from other people and gifting you what is supposed to be an acknowledgement of that uniqueness. Now, things start to change as you move from 25 to 30 and to 35, but perhaps this is where I should bring today's session to a close by addressing two other things. Number one, age 35. Why 35? Well, I have covered this in sessions that I have done previously. I have a catalogue of videos that explain why 35 is the magic number for most men in the West. Now, in other places outside of the West, it might be less. It is usually less. But what happens at 35 is a simple observation. 20, you're still a boy. 25, you're still a boy. You're being mothered. And here's the key thing. In dating, what tends to happen is most men, our desire for sex is so powerful and our desire to ejaculate is so strong that at 20, we will take a woman who is not as attractive, but because she's shown us some level of interest, despite being unattractive from a man's or generally what men perceive to be attractive, the young boy will accept her as being much more attractive than she is. Let's just use numbers to make it more simple. Let's say she's a 6, but she has youth. And now, youth has a way of camouflaging the absence of beauty because you have the plumpness and you have the radiant skin, and youth masks the absence of beauty. So if the woman is a 6 at 20, but he knows he has nothing because on a balance of power basis, he, from an economic intrinsic value, or from a manhood value, or from a gentleman's value, or even from what I call a character value, he's probably a 2. So what you have is this imbalance. She's a 6, he's a 2 at that age. For him, he's just won the lottery. So he goes with a girl who's a 6, but as he moves to his 35, suddenly from 2 he goes to a 4, to a 6, to an 8, and perhaps he's going towards a 9. He's done well financially, he's done well career-wise, he has a great profession, he has a great portfolio of investments, he's doing great. He's discovered his purpose, he understands manhood, he's failed numerous times, and therefore he's contained his failure to a point where he understands what he can and cannot do as a man. Suddenly, as you move towards 35, what you tend to find is that such men start to come into the awareness of their true value. At 20, he took anything, and let's be realistic, we would say she would have been average. A woman's value, and as a woman ages, she has less of what men generally want: beauty, attractiveness, youth, fertility, and even the non-sexual marketplace values. So as she ages, from 20, she's a 6. This will only mean that when she gets to 33, 34, 35, she has to be less or equal to average. Whereas the man's value has gone up to a 7, an 8, or a 9, and then you have this imbalance. And most men I have seen, and I make no exceptions, most men that I have seen start to come to the realization that they deserve better because they think that they settled. Now, they did settle because at the time they made a decision without reference to their future and their potential. And what tends to happen is, because he has not gone through the period of temptation, he has not been in his garden, the Garden of Gethsemane, the road to Damascus. He hasn't actually failed and been tempted. He hasn't been to the wilderness. He falls for the temptations. And a relationship that was thriving, that was perfectly fine, the younger they were, but that should have stayed just in the dating short-term phase, but moved into relationships, extended for more than 5, 6, 7 years, eventually comes to an end. Why? The man comes into his place, and the woman is now out of her place. Now, what this simply means is that if you go back to what I am saying, a woman should not consider marriage until 27. A man should not consider marriage until 35. What you have between those age groups is 8 years. Age gap dating. Now, I covered this in a different session. I won't go into it in today's session. But what this simply means, in order to maintain the best balance of power dynamics and to ensure long-term attractiveness between both sexes, the woman needs to allow the man time to go out into the wilderness and become a man. For that to happen, there has to be at least between 5 and 10 years of an age gap between both parties. If he is 35 and she's 30, it may work. If she's 27 and he's 32, it may work. The more and the higher that number is. So you're going to about middle, which is the median, 7.5 years. 7.5 years, 27 for the woman, 7.5 years, 34.5. Just about to turn 35. Perfect. But as you increase that, it works even better because he's full cooked. He's been slowly cooked and he's a fully cooked man, ready for the woman. But here's the key thing. If you were to play the age gap dating and move backwards, this would also mean that when she's 20, he will be about 28. She will always be the beauty in his eyes, the attractive one, because relative to the women who are his age group, when he turns 40, the women who are 40 are not as attractive if they were the same age, but you're 7 to 8 years is younger. It would simply mean at 40, he's dating a woman who's 32. She's still attractive. But most importantly, both parties respect each other. And on a balance of power basis, there's comparability and therefore value exchange can take place. When you date women who are your age, they might love you, but you will always be a boy in their eyes. Now, in the sessions that follow, I'm going to cover a few, say, derivatives to what I just said in today's session. For example, I'm going to talk about women who are over 35 as a relationships men should avoid. I'm going to talk about women who are older than men as relationships men should avoid. I'm going to talk about even more. Brace yourself, I think it will be quite interesting. I hope today's session has been useful.